Hawaii's bright Sunday becomes a black Sunday. High overhead, Jap raiders are on the loose. Without warning, they circle Pearl Harbor and the city of Honolulu. A surprise attack born of infamy. Sirens screech the alarm too late. Already the yellow men have unloosed their bombs. Planes sweep the Waikiki district. The sky rains death and destruction. Caught unawares on this fateful Sunday morning, Americans quickly and calmly evacuate the danger districts.
On December 7, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, Japanese planes attacked the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. More than 2,000 Americans were killed and destroyed the American battleship USS Arizona and capsized USS Oklahoma. The attack destroyed many other ships and aircrafts and took the country by total surprise. This event sparked the United States' entrance into the war as an enemy against the Axis powers. Soon after the invasion, a United States naval officer sent a hurried dispatch to all naval commands. Radio stations receiving the news interrupted radio broadcasts to inform the American public. Upon hearing the news, many Americans knew what this meant for the United States, a declaration of war on Japan and the rest of the Axis powers. While many sons and husbands were sent off into the war, women were left to play a big role in the war effort. Besides managing their homes while their men were away, some found jobs that were typically male-dominated, such as electricians, welders, and riveters in defense plants. Food, gas, and clothing was rationed, and communities conducted scrap metal drives to be given to the Army as resources. Nearly 350,000 women served in uniform, both at home and abroad, volunteering in women-based war organizations. As the war was slowly becoming more prominent throughout the nation, many looked towards different forms of entertainment to get them through. Hollywood showed several films that brought the American people's emotions towards the war efforts. The Hollywood Bowl was mainly used for these purposes and sometimes was even used for rallies to inspire the American people during this time. Even before the attack on Pearl Harbor, many believed the Japanese posed as a threat to the United States. Most of these Japanese Americans were forced into government camps, also known as internment camps, and faced hate from the entire U.S. population. President Roosevelt's Executive Order 9066 made this relocation possible, and many of the Japanese, although American citizens, were forced into one of many internment camps located across the country.
That stereotype of Asian Americans as the enemy was all too real for George Takei, from his very youngest days growing up in Los Angeles.
I remember that morning, and in fact, I can never forget that morning. It was a terrifying morning. I was in the living room looking out the front window, and I saw two soldiers come marching up our driveway. And I saw at the end of their rifles shiny bayonets. They stomped up to our front door at our two-bedroom home on Garnet Street in Los Angeles and banged on the front door. It was terrifying. My father answered, and we were ordered out of our home.
George Takei's family had committed no crime. Along with thousands of other law-abiding Japanese Americans, they were taken from their home in California in 1942 and forced to relocate to an internment camp. The reason was this. On December 7, 1941, Japan bombed the U.S. Navy base at Pearl Harbor. Overnight, America was at war with Japan, and the U.S. government became suspicious of anyone of Japanese heritage. As a group, these U.S. citizens were labeled by their government as enemy non-aliens.
What's a non-alien? That's a citizen. They couldn't even call us citizens then. We were enemy non-aliens. Why? Because of this. We were taken to the horse stables. And thinking back now, I can't imagine how degrading and humiliating it must have been for my parents to take their 3 children, one a baby, from a 2-bedroom home and told to sleep in that narrow, smelly horse stall. I remember the barbed wire fences and the sentry tower, the searchlight that followed me when I made the night runs from our barrack to the latrine. It was a racist act, pure and simple, and it was an unconstitutional act. I mean, you can't imprison people for their race, and that's what we were imprisoned for.
As the United States was slowly becoming a part of the war front across the world, communication on the war wasn't so easily accessible to the citizens still at home. Many relied on radios for the news, and several posters were issued across the nation as propaganda. These posters riled up many emotions against Axis powers, especially the Japanese. A Los Angeles Examiner newspaper reported news of an unknown object flying over American soil. Many believed this to be extraterrestrial life, but others thought it was another Japanese attack on the United States. This continued a strong aggression towards the Japanese people. Many more newspapers were issued telling the people the air raid was not an alarm. These newspapers spread misinformation, which only fueled the fire against the foreign powers. During this time, a deep fog was seen engulfing Los Angeles' skyline. Since the deep fog was unfamiliar to most, many believed this to be the Japanese using their biochemical weapons on them. It was actually the mass amount of population the U.S. was exerting from their vehicles and factories. With the war in the Pacific getting closer and closer, the U.S. had to put focus on the Japanese American citizens living in their country. Afraid of their loyalty to Japan, the U.S. sent them to internment camps so they could not turn and attack us on our own soil. Signs were posted in Los Angeles and all around the U.S. that announced Japanese American citizens to leave their current place of occupation and to move to the camps. No matter gender or age, all were sent to internment camps. Japanese were housed in barracks. Sometimes entire families lived in one room cell. Internment camps were sometimes located in remote areas where weather conditions weren't always favorable, such as Manzanar and Tule Lake. Japanese also had to use communal areas for washing, laundry, and eating. Mai Nakumbo describes the conditions of the camps. The camps represented a prison, no freedom, no privacy, no America. Internment camps were also guarded by U.S. military personnel and a barbed wire perimeter. In the camps, they were forced to learn American traditions such as the Pledge of Allegiance, their religion, and many more. As the war ended in the Pacific, many rallies were held in the streets of downtown. People filled with hope, safety, and pride knew they could be protected from any threat. Many activities before the war continued on soon after. During World War II, the U.S. thought they had evidence for confining the Japanese Americans, but they were lying. It was a cover-up story that led many citizens to believe they had a reason for putting the Japanese into camps. After World War II, the Japanese Americans were freed from the internment camps. Now their mission was to protest on their rights to live in the U.S. Minoru Yasu spent 9 months in solitary confinement hoping to prove America's treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II was unconstitutionally racist. He was imprisoned so he could meet with the U.S. Supreme Court to prove how cruel America's treatment was on Japanese Americans. Most Japanese Americans went back to work on planes in Los Angeles. They controlled most of the rural areas during that time. World War II ended on September 2, 1945. It was the deadliest war in history. It involved 30 countries and accounted for more than 70 million military and civilian deaths. America accounted for almost 1 million civilian and military deaths as well.